Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the coffee break. Obviously, many people are still there, but we are going to start. We would like to start with the 3 minutes video of Sheikh Al-Atwani, please. Can you launch that? Because we couldn't launch it before the break. If it's still difficult, we will launch it after, okay? Take your time to find it. So let's invite on stage Dr. Raffaele Chiulli, founder and chairman of SAFE, which is in English the Center of Excellence for Energy and Environment. It is also my honor to invite Mrs. Sandra Damijan, board member of Albo Energy and advisor of the government, I guess. She will explain to us much better than what I'm doing here. It is my pleasure to invite Mrs. Marta Gonzalez, International Affairs Manager at the International Gas Union. And it is great pleasure to wake up my friend, Mr. Richard Westerdale, Executive Director at Energy Future Initiatives. And sorry, Richard, if we have been keeping you wait for more than half an hour online. Richard, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Good morning, my friend. Happy to have you connected to us. Well, let's start with you and free you for the rest of your day. Please, what I would ask from you, probably different from the initial plan, is that you present yourself in a couple of minutes, and then you share with us your thoughts about, the soft energy transitions. And I hope your presentation is going to be shown just close to your image. Thank you very much, Richard. The floor is yours.
Sure, Monir, and thank you. Good morning. I'm Rick Westerdale, Executive Director at the Energy Futures Initiative here in Washington, D.C. We are a nonprofit think tank that actually occupies the space between technology and policy. Just a little background on myself. With a little over 3 decades in the energy sector, I bring together a broad perspective, one that includes 2 decades in the oil and gas sector. It includes 8 years with the U.S. State Department, where I served under 2 administrations and 4 secretaries. And it includes my time as an entrepreneur, where many of the things we'll be talking about in the energy transition space, I have actually put into action myself. I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers of Peace City World Congress 23 for putting on this event. And my friend Monir, I'd like to personally thank you, as well as all those in the audience, distinguished guests and dignitaries. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today about the future of energy and the energy transition. My goal today is to provide some perspective on the energy transition, the implications if climate change is not addressed, and the opportunity Peace City World represents. I'd like to begin by talking about what is an energy transition. An energy transition designates a significant change for an energy system related to resources, system structure, scale, economics, end-use behavior, and energy policy. The chart on the left-hand portion of this slide is a graphical representation of the energy transition and all of the interrelated factors that influence its outcome. It was created by MIT for the World Economic Forum this year. Rather than look at each factor individually, which would take my entire allotted time, I will highlight a few things. A transition to a more inclusive, sustainable, affordable, and secure global energy system is an imperative. This has to be done while balancing what I call the nexus of energy: security and access, environmental sustainability, and economic development. We have seen this come into stark focus with the 2 black swan events over the past few years: that of COVID and the war in Ukraine. So it must be done now and in a way that accounts for the impact of significant geopolitical friction. Both public policy and private sector responses will affect the speed and shape of the energy transition to a zero carbon emissions future in the years to come. Now, the simple truth is that we've been in the midst of an energy transition since the beginning of mankind. If you look at the graph here on the left-hand side of this slide, what you will see is that our energy mix has become increasingly dependent on energy from combusted fuels, thus increasing emitted CO2, a significant contributor to global climate change. The two questions that we must answer when it comes to the energy transition are, number one, what is the pace of change? And number two, what are the implications? This chart shows the trends in emissions, and almost all of the emissions are driven by every sector. Although we've seen some flattening over the last few years, you can see electricity and heat continue to rise. Transport is slightly down, and clustered together a group of other sectors that contribute to emissions. In some cases, it's a bit more erratic, like land use. However, one thing is clear, there is no sector of our economy that doesn't contribute a share to global greenhouse gases. So let's talk about climate change and climate change goals. While the Paris Agreement of 2015 aims to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by pursuing efforts to limit temperature increases to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and do this through nationally determined contributions, and subsequently the net zero pledges by many nations, the challenge is daunting, and we have a lot of work to be done. Even in the optimistic scenario, there's a gap of unabated CO2 emissions. In this regard, Peace City World can lead the way and set the standard for future cities as they develop. So what is the call to action? What you see from this chart is the trends in temperature. While we're supposed to be cutting emissions back, what we are actually seeing is temperatures increase as emissions continue to rise. You can see on the left-hand side the actual global average surface temperatures, and on the right-hand side, the trends in change per decade. The darker the red, the more intense the change. This is most significant in high latitudes, leading to more melting in Greenland to real constraints in the polar Arctic ice. And what we're seeing is the effects felt around the world. We are at almost 1.2 degrees Celsius warming so far. If we look at some of the damages we can see on the left-hand side, you see the temperature air anomaly last summer, that was July 13th. You see the dark areas, just how much hotter it has gotten in countries like Saudi Arabia, India, and China, where there were several hundred days of record heat. And we are starting to see the impacts. At 1.1 degrees Celsius, analysts believe there was a 50% increase in the storms that impacted Pakistan, displacing 33 million people. We see at least a degree of warming in the Gulf of Mexico, which has increased the likelihood and severity of storms and hurricanes. And we've seen the European drought, the worst in 250 years, and the California drought, the worst in almost 1,200 years. So what are the implications of addressing climate change? Well, what you see are several things occurring. You see investment shifts, massive new investment in electricity and clean energy infrastructure, including the grid, EV charging, hydrogen, direct air capture, and CO2 pipelines. You actually see fossil investment down, but overall GDP is up. You see employment shifts, a decrease in the oil and gas sector and an increase in renewable energy. Major increases in some manufacturing sectors, such as solar PV, batteries, as well as building efficiency improvements. You see geographic advantages emerge. Countries with critical minerals or zero emissions industrial energy capacity have significant advantages in the new global zero emissions marketplace. The transition could be disruptive without policy and planning to help manage this volatility and transition risk. But inaction on climate change and a temperature increase of about 3 degrees Celsius could cost $178 trillion by 2070, while the global economy could gain $43 trillion over that same period by accelerating the transition to net zero. This is actually an analysis that was done by Deloitte last year in their report, Global Turning Point. Now, many of you are thinking, all right, Rick, what are those energy investments and what does the right energy mix look like? Remember the initial chart I showed you and all those factors impacting the energy transition? Well, the energy landscape is changing at an accelerated pace. This chart shows the emerging clean energy innovations and some of the players, both old and new, that can be applied to transform the peace world city from a vision to reality. So rather than give you the answer, which yet eludes of all of us, because there is no one silver bullet, rather, I'll give you what I see as major considerations. As countries grapple with climate change and carbon reductions, they seek to balance CO2 reductions against reliability and affordability of energy sources, thus creating a high level of consternation. The opportunity for governments, companies, and investors alike includes the following: recognizing that both traditional and alternative energy sources are necessary, given the overarching security and economic implications associated with sustainable change. Understanding the need to optimize an existing asset base that can maintain the supply of energy for the next several decades, with a societal and regulatory demand to achieve the transition in the immediate future. Creating a level playing field for investment, one free of distortions and gamesmanship, where investors are incentivized to increase production today while still directing capital into the necessary technologies, research and development to achieve the goals of reduction. And agreeing the measures of success are as simple as the lowest cost of energy that has the lowest cost for avoided CO2, with consistent standards of measure and reciprocity across jurisdictions, both domestic and international, in the spirit of free markets. And finally, ensuring a planned exit and managed decline delivers sustainable energy along with sustainable earnings for the future of businesses, including the transition of a highly skilled energy workforce that can create the next generation of solutions. In this regard, Peace City World can set an example of how such competing interests can be managed. I know those are short remarks, Munir, but I wanted to give you an opportunity and the audience an opportunity for a discussion and some food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Are you keeping connecting with us, or are you leaving?
Yes, I am. I'm
okay,
here.
So we may have some discussion after the interventions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now it's a great opportunity for me to invite Ms. Sandra Damijan to make an intervention. Do you want to speak from here? or you prefer speaking from there?
Who is first? Raffaele or me?
No, I'm calling Sandra first.
Okay.
Yes, please, if it's okay for you.
Yeah, I will speak from here.
That's good, please.
Thank you. Just waiting for the presentation.
Sorry, we are preparing for the MOUs on white paper. And then
Munir, can you give me this?
you need this one.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry for that.
Thank you very much. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be here today with such a distinguished group of people. I was invited by the organizers to give a presentation on how to finance low carbon energy in sustainable smart cities. And I must say that it's very hard to, because I'm advisor to the Minister of the Economy in Slovenia. It's very hard to even get through the concept of smart city in these very critical times, in times of crisis, in the times that we're experiencing now. For this reason, I also took the liberty to add a subtitle to this, because I would like to demonstrate how we're going to actually achieve this low carbon energy, and I would not call smart city, but smart Slovenia, is actually by decarbonization, but also having the energy independence. And this is currently a big problem in Slovenia, because our energy dependence at the moment is above 30%. So we definitely would like to have this lower. You heard Mr. Westerdale talking about the costs, that if we don't do anything, and I'm not here to convince you, because you're the crowd, you wouldn't be here if you were not already convinced. But just to put into perspective the number he mentioned, 178 trillion of losses if we don't do anything. And we've seen what the nature can do. And also, you know, for New Year's Eve in Slovenia, we had, and we are out country, we had 20 Celsius. On the islands, we have snow, which is, it doesn't happen. And to put this, to illustrate this, how much this is 118 annual budgets of the United States. That's a lot. And what I would like to ask you, and actually what everyone also asks us when we say that we need to do this, is it actually now the proper time that we actually even talk about financing the smart cities, you know, in these times of crisis, or is precisely the crisis that forces us? And we'll come to this response, which I will demonstrate the program to you. Yes, naturally we want to come out of this energy shock with the less damage as possible, but we must not neglect the long-term goal, which is precisely this, what the title says, you know, decarbonizing. And who will play the most important role? Of course, the cities is, and the numbers. I'm a finance person, so the numbers speak for themselves. You know, we have now over more than half of the world's population living in the cities. By 2050, we will have 7 out of 10 people living in the city, and cities have the biggest, so 80% of global GDP is generated in cities, but at the same time, you can see on the slide, they have more than 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So we need to build the cities that are smart, and we need intensive policy coordination. Why I'm saying this is because even if you look at, this is the concepts that are already being developed. So you have the different names for the similar things that we are talking about. Some of them are isolated, some tackle one issue, but the approach we want to take is because we've seen that the key initiatives that have been taken is actually in energy, transport, and communication. And me coming also from the energy sector, naturally I want to focus also on the energy sector, because the energy resources are not without infinite. They're not infinite. So we need to really do much better management than we did so far. We need more of supply. We need infrastructure that can support this, and of course, energy flows. if you look at the concept, and I'm not going to go into details of this, but these are the vectors, the variables of what defines the smart city. And if you check the sub-variables of these 6 of them, you will see that energy is part of everything. Energy is key to everything. You cannot have smart economy if you don't have, let's say, smart energy. And smart energy actually integrates from various sources. It's the innovative approaches, so we need to use the smart technology to have smart energy and, of course, to have a smart city. And, of course, the current situation, I already mentioned this, and coming from a very small country, Slovenia is a very small country, just over 2 million people, so some cities are 2 million, so naturally we want to be a smart country. And we are very much dependent on the gas from, let's say, some partners that are currently not reliable. Even before, when Europe introduced the Green Deal, we have now Repower EU, which means that we need to actually speed up the process of clean energy transition and increase our independence. And this Repower EU plan is precisely saying this, saving energy, producing clean energy, and of course diversifying our energy supplies. And if you allow me, I would like to be very specific, but I will be fast as well, to show you how in Slovenia we want to approach this. So we want to have a smart energy. We have developed a strategy within the Slovenian Academy of Science and Arts as well. So we took all the experts from various fields, also from biodiversity, engineers, financial people, politicians as well, NGOs. And we developed a strategy that, of course, first objective is decarbonization. Second, which nowadays I think for us at least is one of the most important ones, is the independence, self-sufficiency. Then how much of this share in production will be in the renewables, whether the investments in this program are justifiable, and I'll show you the calculations. And number 5 and number 6 points are very, very much relevant in these times, is actually how to ensure a reliable and stable energy, and of course ensuring low energy prices. And we took into consideration all the existing policies in Slovenia, also in the EU, and this is the plan that we come to. So if you look at the projections, so just to see how much, we started with how much of electricity we will need, energy. So if you look at this first graph, I cannot show it here, the first line, the blue one, this is just the basic usage. But then we add a direct consumption. This is the green line. So we see until 2050, we will increase from 12 terawatts per hour to 17.5. But then, if we add, of course, to this the e-mobility, battery consumption, if you even want to talk about, green transition or pumped hydropower plants, we actually, all this when we add the storage as well, we come to this brown line, and you can see how much of terawatt hours we will need by 2050. This red line shows a big gaps that we will have. So the key question is how to double this electricity production, by 2050, while at the same time ensuring decarbonization. We started from the baseline, and the baseline is that the government of Slovenia is going to shut down the thermal power plant by 2035, so which is one of the biggest sources of energy, coal. We're shutting this down. And we don't have much of other production sources. We have the nuclear power plant, the block 1, but it's old technology. So if we take this first scenario, to see, what this means, you see that by 2050, so the shutting down of the thermal power plant will be happening in 2035. Soon after that, we will have the shortage of 12 terawatts per hour. Closer we get to 2050, we will have the shortage of 19. This is unacceptable for us because we will be even more dependent on other sources, other countries. Of course, for us, the first thing is definitely to invest in the second block of nuclear power plant. We will not abolish this because otherwise we don't survive. You know? And we added, this is the orange line, which means that, you know, still, even in this, if we just build the second block of the nuclear power plant, we will still have the shortage right after the closing down the thermal power plant, but also, see here, by 2047, we will have the shortage of 10 terawatts. Why? Because by that time, by 2045, we will have also closing down the first block of the nuclear power plant because it uses the old technology. So we went further, and how to close this gap is actually the second block of nuclear power plant, in addition to big investments in renewables. So we are going to invest, and we already have the plan, in solar, in energy, in batteries. We will invest definitely in storages. So if you look at this graph, we, according to this scenario, we kind of come up to we satisfy the needs that we have with these investments. Here, just to show you what this happens. So with the first one, we achieved the first goal, so which is decarbonizing, but look at also the import dependence. So with the first scenario, which means that we don't do nothing, we stay as it is now, and we, you know, hope for some better times. See this red line? This means that by 2050, we will be 80% dependent from other countries for sources. It's impossible. We're not the sovereign state anymore. If we go only with building nuclear power plant, this is the orange line, we are 40% dependent. Only this green line, so this green line with investments in renewables, this is what makes us less than 10%, which on the yearly basis we can manage this. So it's a strong commitment of our government to go into this direction to have a smart energy. And with this, we definitely achieve already by 2035, 100% low carbon production. We can maintain this, and then we also reduce the CO2 emissions, also by 2050, and the share of production from the renewables will turn into 70%. Now it's not very much. With this strategy, we can achieve this. One of the most important things that worries us all, you know, especially, you know, that we advise our ministers, you know, how to survive in these times is, so many companies die because of the prices of electricity. It's crazy how much we pay now for the electricity, but with these investments, we're actually able to, we're actually able to reach, so first we will have the increase of the price, so the cost price at 70 euros per megawatt hour, but look, we will then able to maintain this price, and this is acceptable price. Dynamics, how much would this cost us? So it will cost around 70 billion euros, 15 billion into production, and 2.5 billion into building a grid for the green transition. And you can see in the graph, most of it, we will definitely continue to invest in nuclear power plant, and let's say half of this in the solar, and then the batteries and so on. Annual investments, and I will be very short here, so you know, until 2029, 2030, it will cost us to invest, so we will spend around between 200 and 500 million into the production and around 100 million into building the grid. Between 230 and 235, because we will have huge investment in the nuclear power plant second block, you will see that we have 660 million to 1,300 million annually. But then after 2035, drastically decreases the investment, so we have around 200 million. This is a very important slide, and being the economist, you know, you will see why I'm saying this, is these investments, even though you see a lot of costs that we have, but still, these costs will actually, you know, in terms of percentage of GDP, you know, it will be, if I just look at until 2030, it will be around 1%. But this 1%, we will have a huge multiplier effect on our economy, on Slovenian economy. What does this mean? So if I go back to answering the question that I posed to you, you know, well, first of all, the green transition is possible. It's not just talking and being nice, but we have a proper plan, and we also can reach a normal level of dependence and the price. But this is the important. A crisis, so the question whether we should even talk about this, is actually always an opportunity and necessity to change the existing model. The history shows that when you have the crisis, the worst thing is what you do is you don't invest. You invest in times of crisis because investing in infrastructure has the biggest, let's say, accelerator for the economy going up and has the biggest multiplier effects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. And thank you especially that you are giving an illustration of an energy transition after the speech of Richard Westerdale. Thank you very much. Dr. Raffaele Chiulli, you are the chairman of SAFE, and thank you for accepting to speak after Sandra. We have 3 men and 2 women, and I wanted to alternate, so sorry for that.
Great.
So I think the floor is yours to share with us your thoughts about innovation, technology, talent, and building smart, sustainable city models. And after that, we will be preparing for signing the MOUs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind invitation, and good morning to everyone. We are going to talk about building sustainable, smart cities and new business models. And for us, there are 3 key elements. One is innovation, technology, and the last one is talent. So let's go through the agenda. Short introduction, sustainability, one of the key drivers, energy, infrastructure, innovation, which means also competitiveness, talent, and sport, which is one of my other passions. Beyond energy, I am privileged to be involved with sport, and then some conclusive remarks. Where do we start from? We start from the concept of sustainable smart city, which means to have a holistic approach, a wide-angle and long-term perspective with regard to energy, to related infrastructures, but also we need to put the right emphasis on the interconnection, which means not linear, not modular, which means intercommunicating and integrated platform. And this means also real-time exchange of information, real-time optimization of the whole system. Sustainability is a cornerstone, which means that is the key driver when we plan, we develop, as Peace City World does, what smart cities are to be, and particularly how they have to function according to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which I have the privilege to concretely implement with a great person, which is the 8th United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, because it was under the leadership of Mr. Ban Ki-moon that these UN Sustainable Development Goals were developed. And we did a lot. We did walk the talk, particularly when we are talking to sport event. Sustainability is a great opportunity to innovate. Sustainability means, as I said, competitiveness, means technology, but also when we talk about sustainable energy, we need to think about mobility, which means new services, which means new infrastructures, which means interconnection and integration. We talk a lot about sustainable development. Sustainable development means long-term strategy, means certainly to try to reduce as much as possible the so-called environmental footprint, but also something that we often forget, which is the water footprint, which is key in our cities. And we need to certainly combine that environmental footprint, that reduction of the environmental burden with 2 other key elements, economic growth and social cohesion. These are the pillars of sustainable development, And certainly, the environmental dimension has to be combined with these two other elements with a long-term perspective. Sustainable development means forget about the old traditional linear economy models. We need to think more and more in a circular way, which means tackling with a new approach the key challenges we have to deal with. And we've heard from the previous speaker, Sandra, but also Richard, how important is this energy transition and how many challenges we have. I wouldn't call it climate change. This is a real climate crisis. This is the right way to call it. Biodiversity loss, as you said, which is one of the key elements also in your country, water, waste, and pollution. And the three dimensions, environmental, economic, and social, should lead us towards forgetting about the traditional end of life in current production and consumption practices. We need to think about multiple life cycles. We need to think about reducing where possible and where it's not possible to reuse, recycle. This is ecology. Ecology means that a byproduct or a waste for a certain industrial production cycle becomes new material or energy recover from that cycle. So waste management is a good example of that. We cannot think about building smart cities, the cities of the future, without thinking to the, for example, valorization of waste. Waste is the resources. And we need to think to new circular waste management system, which are essential when we talk about circular economy. But certainly, circularity is very much in line with the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and we want to walk the talk on that. Energy and transport. Energy and transport, as Sandra was clearly showing, are two key elements. One, when we talk about energy is strictly related to decarbonization, and decarbonization is a must, because energy and transport accounts today for 2/3 of global greenhouse gases emission. And why I mention GHG and not just carbon dioxide? Because often we forget that we have other greenhouse gases with a significant higher global warming power than carbon dioxide. So we need to think to greenhouse gases as a whole. And as Sandra said before, cities account more or less for 70% of the global greenhouse gases emission and consume 3/4 of the overall natural resources. Fossil fuels, and we have Marta here from, she's a gas expert, is going to tell us more about how important gas in the energy transition, because we have to think about what we have today, and we need to think that today the generation of electricity is largely still related to fossil fuels. Gas plays a significant role. So phasing out of the fossil fuels means also going forward to a new type of mobility, a more sustainable mobility, which requires what? Something that we talk very little about. Is a mindset change, is a behavioral change. We need to start from each of us. We need to adopt systems, method, approach, which are more sustainable, which means trying to reduce the use of your car when it's not needed. In sport, in global sport event, I have the honor to be president of the association of all the international sport federations recognized by the IOC. Is a must, a mindset change when we need to reduce cars utilization. We need to reduce, for example, the plastics, which is when I see athletes making large use of unnecessary, plastics and plastic bottles, which means also polluting our ocean, polluting our planet. So mindset and behavioral changes. We need to start with ourselves, maybe also with more sober lifestyles. Everyday lifestyles has to be more sober and more sustainable. Certainly, when we talk about infrastructure, they are key to the transition, and we need a digitalized infrastructure platform ecosystem because otherwise we are not going to have smart cities, which means smart grids, biodirectional lines, which means new distribution network, and automated control of the power and supply demand, which often is very much unbalanced. Smart mobility platforms are very, very important for many things, such as autonomous driving vehicle, which is the very near future. Smart parking, think about the Internet of Things or the artificial intelligence. Smart traffic light management to get real-time useful information about congestions, about smart street lighting is also another key element. So we need to think also about the building of the future, the smart building, where we will have so many sensors which will provide detailed real-time, not only environmental, but also operational data. Think about how important is the occupancy of this building, and think about how much is important to remotely control through domotics, through technologies, the energy utilization, but also the comfort of all of us living in these buildings. And when you think about transition, we need to, and I'm sure that Marta would agree with that renewable energy sources, most of them are intermittent. Think about solar, think about wind. And our Chinese colleague here is dealing with batteries. Batteries, energy storage is fundamental because you need to ensure that you do not consume the energy when the energy is produced. You need to store efficiently and effectively the energy, and you need to create a real-time, hopefully, balance between supply and demand. So vehicle-to-grid is going to play a key role. Is a win-win situation, the vehicle-to-grid, because electric vehicles can be an integrated part of the infrastructure of the energy storage, distributed, not necessarily centralized energy storage. And the vehicle-to-grid solution certainly will go into the direction of a more distributed energy resources system. And this concept of the vehicle-to-grid, we often underestimate the potential on the electric boat, which means a boat to grid or a grid to boat. And this is part of, in many cases already today, of local energy communities solution. Think about the large cruise vessels, ships. This is an amazing potential for storage. So sustainable mobility certainly means not only decarbonize, not only reduce the noise and pollution, but means reduce our travel times, creating more efficiency, multimodal transportation, and also a mindset change in the greater public transport usage. So when we talk about sustainable mobility, we need to think to the people which are more vulnerable, and we need to give access to sustainable mobility to these people. Otherwise, social exclusion is there, and we don't want that. So micro and micro mobility, and certainly reduction of emission and congestion. Quickly, talent. We talk about talent. We've heard about how important is the education. And certainly, innovation is related with individual and collective talent. But allow me to say that my experience as teaching at some universities, it's that the traditional education system focus more on theory, focus less on the learning by doing, on practical, down-to-earth elements. And we are developing skills, but we are creating specialized people, but certainly we are neglecting often about nurturing and engaging talents. This is a list of the new professions that are required in the smart cities. So artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data scientists, cybersecurity, which is key, and other professions that you see. So very quickly, I'm going towards the end of my presentation. As we said, you need to identify, to nurture, and try as much as possible to engage talent. And this is our primary objective at SAFE, and is a combination in our, what we consider a toolbox. You need to combine hard and soft skills. And instilling, as I discussed yesterday with Sandra, 3 elements: the eagerness to learn, entrepreneurship, and leadership. We need a leader who are capable to inspire the new generation. Sport can play a key role. So sport is vital to the economies of city. And certainly most of the large-scale sport events take place, including the Olympic Games or World Championship, take place in the city. So urbanization should certainly give the opportunity to practice a sport. Physical mobility is important, a sporting culture. And when we use infrastructure, we need to think about legacy, the legacy we are going to build with the local communities and citizens. So this is my conclusion very briefly. Sustainability is at the core of the cities of the future. And we've seen how important is energy transition, digital transformation, infrastructure, and mobility. And certainly, innovation and technologies are strictly interrelated with sustainability. Sustainability means developing talent, individual and collective talent, means put workplaces and communities with the human dimension at the center. This is fundamental. A society where we valorize individual and collective talent and leaders who inspire the new generation is going to be crucial. Our mission at SAFE is certainly to be proactively involved in building the cities of the future. And certainly, as I'm sure we will have the opportunity to do together, we are here to help, to support the planning and the developing of the future cities, the so-called sustainable, smart, and peace cities. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raffaele Chiulli. So keep with us, and Sandra, please, I'm going to invite you to sign the MOUs as agreed, first with Albo Energy and second with SAFE, okay?
Thank you.
May I invite on stage Dr. Riyad Tukabri and Mr. John Mavrak, please, President and Chairman of Peace City World. So as you see, it's Albo. And this is your pen. This is yours. عندك exemplaire بركة. زوز. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And please, for the photo. Stand here for the photo, please.
Pretending day by day that someone somewhere will soon make a change.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sandra. Dr. Chiulli.
God's great big family.
Congratulations, safe, and congratulations, Peace City World. May I check with production if Richard is still with us?
I'm here, Monir.
Oh, great. Do you have any question or any remark to what we have shared up to now?
Not at this point, Monir. What I would say is these are prime examples of the initiatives and the actions that we must take collectively. And so I'm pleased to see the MOUs that were signed. I'm also excited by my colleague and the efforts that are being made in her country to take those steps necessary to address both energy security in the context of climate change and environmental development.
Thank you very much, Richard. Let's hear from Mrs. Marta Gonzalez, International Affairs Manager at International Gas Union.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a real pleasure for me to be here and have the opportunity to participate in this timely panel about the future of energy and how we can cover the main dilemma that we have today, that is energy security with climate change action, and in particular, the role of the gas in the energy transition. My name is Marta Gonzalez, Senior Advisor of the International Gas Union, and for those who haven't heard yet about the organization, it's an international organization that was founded more than 90 years ago, covering the 5 continents and the gas supply chains from the exploration, transportation, distribution, and shipping. And in our advocacy, we have the natural gas, the biogas, biomethane, all the low carbon gases, as well as the hydrogen. If you ask me what is the future of energy, I really answer is the carbonized energy, but with a difference with a different energy mix for each country. My first remark is energy is vital to human society, and it needs to be available, it needs to be secure, it needs to be reliable, with a reduced environmental impact, whilst remaining affordable. And climate change presents really significant risks to the planet. And taking into consideration the new environment in which we are, okay, about the sustainability for all sectors, the social responsibility, the gender equality, IUU acknowledges that there is not just only one transition, and insists on the necessity of the most pragmatic approach that can lead us to solve at the same time the climate and energy crisis, as well as the food crisis, in the shortest period of time. My second remark goes to the United Nations goals, are not only about energy. We need to include an inclusive vision, focus on reducing inequality among countries, and ensure access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable modern energy for all. Here, the IUU commitment is to establish the best international dialogue that help developing regions transform towards developed ones, with a dialogue between different sectors, okay, as well as the policymakers and regulators. And gas will be a major solution to this point. Let me comment the key drivers and challenges that we have when we talk about the future of energy. The first one is primary energy consumption and population growth. According to the United Nations, global population growth has reached 8 billion people last year, with an increase of 2 billion people in the last 40 years. These new citizens will demand more energy and more food, and that's the new role of the fertilizers. My second statement here is that the forecasts are even more relevant because we are going to face an acceleration of that. The next 1 billion people will be in the next 15 years, and by mid-century we'll have 2 billion people more. So what we have seen in the last 40 years, now we are going to see in the next 25 years. But if we compare this population growth with the growth of the primary energy consumption, we can see a difference. While the population growth has risen 80%, the energy primary consumption reached 112%. And if we take a glimpse at a regional approach, we can identify different figures. And let me explain you. For instance, while Asian population growth increasing 79%, now, well, changing from 2.6 billion people to 4.7 billion people, its primary energy consumption has increased by 452%. And concretely, China leads this incremental in primary energy consumption, with a similar per capita energy consumption to Europe. On the other hand, we have another country that is India, that today has the same population as China, but it's expected that in 2023 they surpass the population of China with the lowest energy consumption in the world, similar to the African continent. So population growth worldwide is a determinant factor, driven by the growth in Africa and Asia, and in concrete by countries like China and India. So at this point, we must highlight that by 2030 and 2050, global energy needs will require growth for renewables and for gas of all types. It is not possible neither in 2030 nor in 2050 to supply world energy needs from only intermittent solar and wind resources. So we need a backup solution always, because a modern energy is not correlated to blackouts in electricity. My second driver is access to energy and poverty thresholds. Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, as well as several countries in Asia, represent regions of developing and underdeveloped countries, where energy access is not guaranteed today in all these regions. And this has provoked something that it's even much more relevant, that is deforestation. We have in some areas, like in Brazil, where this deforestation comes from the use of wood as primary energy. According to the United Nations, the goal number 1 is ending poverty in all its forms everywhere. And the rising inflation, jointly with the war in Ukraine, has provoked an increase in the projections of people living beneath this poverty threshold. In the previous analysis, United Nations considered that it was around 581 million people, and currently it's around 676 million people, and with 1 in 10 people worldwide suffering from hunger. And in a world with a significant population growth, the role of fertilizers is key to allowing the end of poverty. And natural gas is a feedstock of fertilizers. The 60% of the fertilizers use natural gas today, and it's going to be much more relevant in the future. And the third driver, for sure, is climate change fight. And let me say something. Pragmatism as the best green policy decision. Decarbonization is an urgent priority for the world, and the only one that we can achieve in the time available to avert the dangerous climate change impacts, with gas playing a key role. The latest IPCC reports were very clear, and as commented our previous colleagues, okay, of these 1.5 degrees, we have consumed the equivalent of 1.2 degrees. And the likelihood to surpass this limit is more than the 80%. Regrettably, COP27 seems to take for granted that we will breach this limit. So my question here is whether we are giving the right signals or not. We are convinced that if we really consider that we want to fight against the climate change, it is necessary to align the time horizons. We cannot talk about the necessity of finding solutions before 2030 while phasing down coal in 2060 and 2070. Please remember the differences between phasing down and phasing out that was discussed at COP26. Coal is the fossil fuel that produces the most CO2 and methane emissions, both. According to the International Energy document released last year, the coal open mines are emitting more methane than the gas exploration. It means that we need to recover these methane emissions. And for sure, the gas industry is much more interested in recovering all its molecules. In this context of low carbon energy transition, the discussion about how to bridge the gap between the most carbon intensive fuels that we have today, coal and oil, towards a decarbonized and circular economy reinforces the role of the natural gas. And gas is the fossil fuel with the lowest carbon emissions, and which itself can be decarbonized in the future with the penetration of biogas, biomethane, and hydrogen. So at this point, we must think about the reason of these unaffordable gas prices that we have seen in the last 2 years, which by no means have been really bad news for the climate. The coal fuel to gas switch that we have seen in emerging economies as well in developed countries that had both thermal capacity have distracted gas demand, and we have more emissions today. And in all the scenarios of the International Energy Agency, there is still coal, oil, and gas by mid-century. So the question is, we can do more, with clear signals of where gas can substitute more these other fossil fuels. And the last point is the key sectors to decarbonize. For me, there are, 3 key sectors. The first one, for sure, as we have seen, is power. Because power is relatively easy, you have less players to decarbonize. We have heard that the new power generation capacity now is only renewable, what is really good. However, if we analyze the data of how it's produced, we realize that more than the 50% of this extra power is generated by coal, and just only an 8% by gas. As commented before, the rocketing prices of gas has led economies to prioritize bills over climate. Where there is thermal capacity of coal and gas, we have seen the maximization of coal consumption. And we have other countries like China and India, where the power generation represent now the 60% or the 70% respectively. So we must facilitate an urgent transition towards renewables with gas as a backup. The next topic is about the transport sector, and I'm not going to repeat what the proposals of our colleagues that are really, really good. But for me, the topic here is, although today there could be good alternatives with the EVs, maybe in the future we will have also the biofuels. It's something that it's under a very good development, okay? But here the key bottleneck that we have to consider is how we are going to solve in the low-income countries, because people cannot afford just changing their cars, neither for a diesel or an EV. The last could be hard-to-abate sectors that need huge amounts of thermal energy that cannot be electrified, like steel and cement. And here there is a very, very good option for hydrogen, a commodity that has been used in the past in many industrial processes, so we have experience, but we have also the opportunity to have decarbonized hydrogen with the green, the blue, the turquoise, and pink hydrogen. And the worldwide framework is changing with a clear support from the financial institutions. The IUU has enhanced and reinforced collaboration with government, policymakers, and regulators, as well as the development banks of different regions, which is a cornerstone for access to capital. The IUU message to the policymakers and the financial community has been very clear. Gas infrastructure investment will not be a stranded asset, even where strict climate commitments are in place. There are other molecules like biomethane, biogas, and hydrogen that will be part of the future. Many thanks to all.
Thank you very much. Dear panelists, do you have any question after what we have been hearing from Marta Gonzalez? Okay, so let's move directly to Dr. Zhe Zhang. Dr. Zhe Zhang is CEO of KX Power, building the future of energy storage.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm aware that I'm the last speaker in the morning, so in the interest of time, I won't be very thorough about my presentation. I hope you could have the patience to bear with me for a few minutes. So first of all, what is energy storage? I think our panel chairman and also the chairman of SAFE has given you some examples of what kind of energy storage we are adopting now. But actually, energy storage is not something which is very remote to everybody. Our ancestors start to use reservoir to store energy. And even longer ago, from various movies, TV series, we see the archers, they use the bow to charge and discharge an arrow. So that is another example of energy storage. But now we are smarter than that, and we are starting to use super batteries to store energy, which is able to afford the consumption of hundreds of thousands of families of a big town to survive for 6 months almost. So I think energy storage is very important and it's happening every day around us. Well, why energy storage is an integral part of a decarbonized smart city? So my answer to that is, the reason for it is, I think our colleagues has also shared with their vision and also perception of what kind of smart cities we are building now. One of the key infrastructure challenge now with the current system is that all the power transmission and distribution network, their design is based on coal or gas-fired generation. But when you start to adopt more and more green energy, such as solar or wind, one of the biggest challenges will be its intermittency. Then because of that, intermittency means that you cannot really start or stop the generation of the power, at irregular intervals. So, which means that it will cause lots of pressure and challenge to the grid system, which is not designed for this new challenge. So that is why energy storage steps in, so that we can, you have the intermittency challenge, and you don't need to, throw away the power you generated out of your solar farm or wind farm. You can store it. So that is why, we have the ability to store the energy so that we can either, discharge the electricity when the price goes up, and then we charge the electricity when there's very little people to use the energy, but the solar and wind are still functioning. And the other side we can contribute to a smart city is that we can greatly eradicate the challenge of intermittency because the grid is connected with our super battery, and we can help them to manage their frequency pressure. So that is how we can be an integral part of a city's infrastructure system. And then, what is KX Power, who we are, what can we deliver? So we are based in London, and we are a national champion in the United Kingdom in the industry of energy storage. And very recently, we have been ranked as number 6 of top 10 global energy storage companies to be watched in 2023. Our primary funder is BlackRock, who obviously is the largest asset manager in the world, who manage $11 trillion US. I'm sure, some of their LPs are probably sitting in the audience seats, and, BlackRock is managing some of your monies there. And they also have their mutual funds subsidiaries, and every of us can, be entitled to subscribe their financial products as well. And they are very supportive for us to, go beyond the United Kingdom and expand into Europe and the Middle East. So that is why we are here, and we want to, utilize our expertise, utilize our existing kind of, various experience from doing business in the United Kingdom and try to expand it abroad. And what we are doing now and our daily life is, we monitor our batteries every 30 minutes. So we charge, discharge, we do algorithm power trading every half an hour, and we also sign up various contracts with the national grids of the United Kingdom so that we provide our frequency response service to them so as to help them to regulate or manage the transmission and distribution problems. And that is quite profitable. So on the one hand, we think we are contributing to the local community, and on the other hand, we are generating good returns for the investors as well. So we are very proud of what we are doing, but in the meanwhile, we understand that each market is quite different. So in the UK, it is highly deregulated and with a power trading market with a very high level of liquidity. So I start to travel across Europe, and we have a very large amount of pipeline projects in Spain, Netherlands, and Italy, for instance. So this is what we are doing now. And about the future of energy storage, I would say, well, the technology will evolve all the time. The way we are seeing our ancestors will be the same way our descendants will see us, which means that the technology we are adopting now will be out of date for sure one day. But I never have a doubt that this is going to be a market that we need the wisdom of policymakers. And we definitely would need to promote a fully market-oriented marketplace for everybody. And thirdly, we need to create the attraction of private capital so that they can flush in the way as BlackRock and KX Power is doing now. So I'm aware that the lunchtime is coming, so I'm going to give back the floor to Munir, and I hope you good appetite to recharge yourself some energy during the lunch break. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my friend. Thank you. Well, the schedule is very busy, but we are going to take 3 minutes to see the video that we couldn't see earlier from Sheikh Saddam Latwani. Is that ready? Thank you very much.